Hello, my name is Tony Sanders, and I will be presenting my PowerPoint about Shahanmeh Inferno to you. Starting off from the beginning of human suffering in Shahanmeh. By the hairs of his head, he was dragged up to the deserted place. They were soared, and he was planted abreast of the royal cheddar when it was done. In this quote, I feel as if they were like his son went against his own father and his own father's wishes, to be exact, in which caused him to gain most of his enemies throughout him not being close to his father. But in that fact, I feel as if like his father never really got to get to know his son or anything, because the son ended up growing enemies and the father ended up killing his own son because he grew another enemy who he didn't know of. And within that happening, the father never grew a relationship with his own son. Human suffering in Inferno. The quote states, since your blistering pride will not be stilled, you are made of suffer more, no more torment other than your rage itself could punish your God and pride more perfectly. This quote, it showed me how souls were tortured for crimes in the human's pain, which was caused by an era of sins, because the suffering was only one of its own, which of who was ever causing the suffering, which was Inferior. The tragic of human exists in Shahanmeh. It was confidently said that most of the tragedy existed in the Shahanmeh after the death of Sharad. His house happened to get burnt down, and it was giving and gave all his riches away. Rustin was loved and decided to follow his death, and it crushed everyone with sorrows, and everyone's devastated and filled with the most grief that could come. Mortality in Shahanmeh's and Inferior. Rustin began to face with mortality after he killed someone who later on he found out was his son, which it brought his family sadness. The family became devastated because the father started to realize that he never really honestly got to know his son or watch him grow up and become a man, or he never got to have a good relationship with his son. But his death showed me that mortality can bring any character or anyone different types of stress within someone close to you's death, or anyone's death at that. Also, for the inferior, Dante stated that the sinners were identified as miserable because they have no view of a good life due to his mistakes that he made. And to me, I feel as if Dante processed mortality so he could have time to go fix his old path that he created and make everything right from where he messed up. Make everything right from the beginning where he messed up. How does one deal with suffering? Shaheen. They dealt with suffering by praying to their God and accepting that their faith they have wrong and the situation that they were in. And it doesn't mean to let everything go in one ear, not the other, but it does mean you need to learn from your mistakes because they're going to catch up with you sooner or later. How does one deal with suffering? The inferior. there was a lesson that Dante needed to learn, which was to deal with suffering throughout God, because he would suffer like everyone else eventually. But he never stayed away from the wrong path. I understand this like by seeing, because others were in the level deep in hell, because Francine did not bear her own problems. She found her own way of healing. And I felt as if like this book was about dealing with suffering in so many different ways. Suffering is a pain that's caused when it's suffering lies different within everybody. Everybody takes it differently. Human mortality. I feel and I learned like nowadays about mortality, because nobody should take their own life for granted, anybody's life for granted at that, because everyone should understand that life can be a scary process. Life can be scary. It is life. Life is something that is a continuous circle that will end eventually. But my thing is, you have time to mess up, you have time to do things wrong. But my thing is, are you going to fix it? At the end of the day, if you make a wrong path, make sure you go back and try to fix the things, to fix all the stuff you did wrong, all the mistakes, fix everything, because at the end of the day, stuff is going to catch up to you, and you don't want that to happen. Because you have to remember, everybody has to remember, even me, that your life is your life. Live your life to how you feel as if you're doing right. Nobody can choose your happiness but you. And nobody can really like your happiness. What lies in between you, within you, your happiness is yours. But throughout this, Dante and Russell has taught me to cherish life with when I still have it. I'm going to cherish this until the end, I promise. But thank you for listening to my presentation.